Shift your perspective and you shift your reality. I wanted to talk today about time, perspective, and possibility. And we just recently finished up the Shadow Work series, and this feels like loosely tied to it because this is actually something that can help when you're doing things like inner child work and things like that. But also, it can help with manifestation because really what we need to understand is that. Perspective really colors the way we see absolutely everything. And so sometimes we can feel stuck. And if you think of this in terms of like a board game, right? So let's just use like Monopoly as an example. So if you think that you're sitting on the starting place, you may not have any idea what's happening over on the other side of the board. But if you allow your perspective to lift, and you're looking down at the board, you can see the whole thing, right? So if we think of this from like a city perspective, if you are, walking down the street, you're going to have nothing but tall buildings that are blocking your view on all around you. But if you have an aerial view, you can see the whole structure of how things run and how they're working, right? So, and again, that's the view that our higher mind has, AKA higher self. Coming back to the 9 levels of consciousness. So when we pause, when we're having those moments where we're feeling stuck or we feel like we're not making progress, or let's say you're doing some shadow work and you keep seeming to have this loop and you're aware of it and you're trying to make the shift. But the reality is we also need to remember that from one perspective, we're technically outside of time, because time is a man-made construct, right? So it is one of the rules of the game. So if we come back to the 9 levels of consciousness, and again, of course, I'm going to be popping diagrams up because I love a good diagram. But if we think of level 5, the collective automatic mind, that's where we determine the rules of the game. So that's going to include things like, hey, let's have time, right? So that things feel like they move along in a linear fashion, right? But the fact is we are consciousness, which is existent, period, not existing. It literally just exists, period. And so it's not linear, it is all, right? And that is us. We are part of that. We are part of source, that consciousness, intelligent infinity, God, whatever name you choose, we are connected. We are part of that. So we are part of that, eternity with source. And obviously not our physical bodies, but our consciousness, our spirit. And so when we understand that, then when we are doing shadow work, it puts us in a situation where we can minister to our younger self because we are literally outside of time. So when you are taking a moment to be still and just to speak to your inner child or your younger self, whatever that may be. And I actually I have pictures of myself at a variety of different ages that I keep handy because sometimes that's just a really easy way for me to connect with that version of myself. And I'll literally just touch it and speak to her, me, and have that moment. But sometimes I just do it this way. And when I do that, literally it's like speaking to that version of myself in that moment, which literally changes the way that we feel about things. And that's part of what can make shadow work so powerful, is when we are able to step outside that. And again, from a manifesting perspective, part of the reason why this is important is just understanding that perspective, are we on the ground or are we in the aerial view? When we realize that, we can think of something as being really big. And I think I mentioned this in one of the videos that we did where I was talking about the tips for manifesting, which I'll eventually have to do a series on. But one of the things that we realized is because a friend of mine and I were sitting down just kind of talking about this, and it came from that. And when we were talking about it, part of what we realized is so much of scale is perception. It's like value, which can be seemingly arbitrary. That was actually, I think, the part that I was talking about. And so when we stop viewing things through that lens of being hard or big or whatever, like if I'm trying to manifest something and it feels big, I am unintentionally making it less likely that I'll manifest it because I think it's a big deal, rather than just realizing, I mean, it's like manifesting anything. It either is here or it's not going to be here. It's that simple. It's a 1 or a 0, it's an on or an off. But it's not about the scale or perspective, because it literally depends on how we're looking at it. So for one person, giving somebody $1 may be their last dollar. For somebody else, giving $1 million may be a drop in the bucket because they have billions, right? So again, scale is all about perception. So you can change your perspective, and that will then change the way that you see things. And that's a really powerful thing to understand. So hopefully that kind of excites somebody and gives you some fresh ideas today. And have a wonderful day.